Creative block happens to everyone. I think we can all say it's happened to all of us. We go to sit down and create and no ideas flow. What once came naturally just isn't there anymore. There's no ideas, and then we feel frustrated at not having those ideas. So today what we're going to look at is 5 ways to overcome creative block. So for those of you who don't know me, hi, I'm Kirsty and I'm a cognitive behaviour therapist who works in the UK. So now let's get straight to those 5 tips backed by research to overcome creative block. So tip number 1 is don't wait for inspiration to strike. So it can be very tempting to think, I'm just going to wait until that idea comes to me, or I have a flow of ideas. But then those ideas might not ever come, or might take a very long time to come. So what a study found who compared writers who sat down at a set time every day and wrote something, even if they didn't have anything particular to write or didn't have a big idea, versus those who waited for inspiration to strike. And the study found that those who kind of sat down at regular intervals were more creative. So what it can be really good to do is kind of make that your art part of your routine, even if there's no ideas. So tip number 2 is at the other end of the scale. So it's about taking breaks. So it's the importance that if you've been creative for a while and just no ideas are flowing, the importance of getting up and taking a break. So a study that asked people to come up with creative ideas from a bit of paper, and as many as they could, found that those who took a break came up with more ideas, and particularly those who took a break and did something completely unrelated. So a completely unrelated task had the highest levels of creativity and the highest levels of ideas. So yeah, top number 2 is take breaks. So you've got tip number 1, which is kind of make it part of your routine. Don't wait for inspiration to strike. But if you're not having any luck and inspiration hasn't come in a while, do take a break. So tip number 3 is to get active. So a Stanford study found that creative output and creativity increased by up to 60% when walking versus sitting. And the environment didn't seem to make a difference. So it didn't seem to matter whether the walk-in was indoors or outdoors. It seemed to be the act of being active itself. So get out, be active. And I guess if we think about creatives throughout various different fields, we can see that often walking or other activities where people attributed that to their success. So for example, Steve Jobs was famous for his walk-in meetings and thought it triggered creativity. There are also people throughout history, so Darwin, Dickens, Freud, Beethoven, these people all kind of attribute walking and being active to their ideas and creativity. So tip number 4 is notice our thoughts. So our thoughts really impact how we feel. And often we don't notice our thoughts or question if they're accurate or not. But what it can be really good to do is notice what thoughts accompany creative block. So the thoughts we're having before, during, and after. So about the creative block we've had. Because these can give us insight into themes and fears that we have that might be driving that creative block. We're all different, but common themes that often drive creative block are fear of failure, fear of what other people think, fear that it won't be good enough, kind of perfectionist thoughts. So it's really good to look at what's driving that. It could also be kind of a fear of not creating enough. And then that puts us in a fight or flight mode of, oh my goodness, I didn't create enough. So we're focused on the threat of not creating. So ideas are flowing less. So we're less likely to create and we're getting a bit of a cycle. So noticing our thoughts is very important because then we can kind of understand what's driving the creative block and focus on that. And I will do more videos on each of those things I've talked about in terms of fear of failure in a bit more depth and fear of what other people think of our work. But it's a good start just to notice so we can at least take steps to then focus on what's driving our creative block. Tip number 5 is to allow yourself to fail. So it's starting to change your relationship with failure. Often, as mentioned before, fear of failure can be a big drive of creative block. We fear if this idea is not good enough, so it blocks ideas. So it's trying to reframe our relationship with failure. Actually, do we learn from things not going exactly how we wanted them to go? So also starting to think about, even if we do get rejected, does that matter? Or does it mean that actually the work's bad, or is it just one person's perspective? It's good also to look at people we admire who have had failures or setbacks, or people who've rejected them, to start to kind of challenge what we think about failure. So a good example is Stephen King. His first book got rejected nearly 30 times before being published. So it's good to look at people in terms of their work and kind of the journey they've gone through with it, to kind of challenge that if things don't go right, it means it's never going to go right. It doesn't mean that work was bad. It just means one person had an opinion on it that other people actually disagree with, if we look at Stephen King's book now. So thank you so much for listening. If you liked today's video, then please subscribe for more content. See you all soon.